Okay, welcome back. Hope you're all having a great week. Today, we're continuing our RBT exam practice question series where we're going through 10 RBT exam questions and breaking them down together. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. If you're looking for our proven study materials, please check out rbtexamreview.com. We've helped out thousands of RBTs pass their exam. We offer 3 practice exams, a task list study guide, combo pack, comes with flashcards. It's our best deal. And of course, our competency study guide as well. Congratulations to all those who recently passed. When you do pass, please let us know so we can include you in our Sunday shout out. Other than that, keep the questions coming. Work hard, study hard. Let's get to our questions. Question 1. Which of the following scenarios represents a contingency? First things first, how do we attack a question like this? Because this is basically a definition question disguised as a scenario question. So when you're in this situation, you need to find what you're trying to figure out. And what you're really trying to determine is, what is a contingency? And as we know, a contingency is an if-then statement. If you do something, then something happens. First you do something, then something happens. That's how we set up a contingency in ABA. As an RBT, you should be constantly establishing contingencies for your clients. It offers you opportunities to reinforce for behaviors you want to see. So that being said, we're looking for the scenario that represents an if-then statement, a first-then statement, one of those. Let's look at A. Tom buys his 2 kids ice cream on the way to the ballet so they won't misbehave during the show. What's wrong with A? Why is A not a contingency? A contingency, again, is an if-then. Tom says, I'm going to buy you ice cream. Now you must misbehave. Tom has reversed the contingency, so the then is coming before the if. In this case, it's a bribe. We don't bribe in ABA, we establish contingencies. The ice cream should come after the kids behaving, but instead the ice cream comes before, and now the kids are just expected to behave, but they've already earned the consequence. A is a bribe, it is not a contingency. B, every 5 minutes, Linda delivers praise to her client, regardless of what the client is doing. The key word here is regardless of what the client is doing. And the contingency, the client is expected to do something in order to get reinforcement, or in this case, praise. If Linda's delivering praise no matter what, this is actually considered non-contingent reinforcement. There is no contingency in place. Linda is simply delivering reinforcement every 5 minutes. C, James gets to watch TV for 30 minutes after dinner, but he must eat all his vegetables. Okay, where's our if? Our if is eating vegetables. If James eats all his vegetables, then he gets to watch TV for 30 minutes. The only way James gets to watch TV for 30 minutes is if he eats his vegetables. This is a contingency. Understand the difference between a bribe, A, non-contingent reinforcement, B, and a contingency, C. And then D, it typically takes Albert 5 minutes to answer 10 questions. That's just collecting data. Don't be thrown off by answer choices that seem to not fit. D has nothing to do with the contingency. We're simply taking data. C is going to be our contingency. If James eats all his vegetables, then he gets to watch TV for 30 minutes after dinner. C is our answer. During a 60-minute session, your client threw a punch at his sister 4 times. What is the average inter-response time for punch throwing? A couple different things in this question. First things first. What are we looking for? We're looking for inter-response time. Specifically, the average inter-response time. Now, what is inter-response time? Inter-response time is the time in between our responses. And our response here is punch throwing. Why do I stress the importance of knowing your terms and definitions? Because if we don't know what inter-response time is, this question becomes a guessing game. If we know what inter-response time is, right, it becomes very simple. We have 4 responses that happened in 60 minutes. All we have to do now is find an average. How do we find an average? We simply divide 60 divided by 4, which gives us 15. So on average, every 15 minutes, your client threw a punch. Now remember, an average is just that. It's just the average amount of time in between these responses. Does it mean that every 15 minutes on the money, the client threw a punch? Not necessarily, but based on information, if he threw 4 punches in 60 minutes, then on average, every 15 minutes, a punch was thrown. So you really need to know 2 things here. You need to know what inter-response time is, and you need to know how to find an average. If you don't know how to find an average, okay, it's a very simple calculation, right? We're just taking our total time right here, 60 minutes, and dividing it by how many responses? Just 4. So every 15 minutes, we had a response. So our average IRT, the average time in between punches, would be 15 minutes. This is a very easy question. Average questions, rate questions, these type of questions on the exam should be easy, okay? But you need to prepare. If you don't know how to find an average, work on averages, okay? If you don't know what interresponse time is, go back to measurement, to continuous measurement, and review a little bit, right? That's the purpose of these questions. We're trying to find weaknesses in your knowledge. When you identify a weakness, don't just move on, go address it. So if you don't know what interresponse time is, stop right now, look up continuous measurement, review it, come back to the questions. Ashley, a 10-year-old girl, spends most of her time alone in her room. Ashley's mom wants Ashley to spend more time with the family. Whenever Ashley comes out of her room, Ashley's mom gets really excited and showers Ashley with praise, but Ashley only stays in her room more afterwards. Praise functions as what? What is the question asking about? The question is asking about the praise. So we have a lot of information here. The question wants to know about the praise. When does the praise occur? Well, if we see here, Ashley's mom showers Ashley with praise whenever Ashley comes out of her room. So some sort of consequence for Ashley coming out of her room. We know it's a consequence. What do we know about consequences? Well, in order to determine if it's punishment or reinforcement, we need to know how did that consequence affect the behavior. If it increased it, it's going to be reinforcement. If it decreased it, it's going to be punishment. If we continue reading, it says Ashley only stays in her room more afterwards. So Ashley stopped coming out of her room once she started receiving praise. That behavior decreased. The praise is actually functioning as punishment. Then we ask ourselves, was the praise added or taken away? Well, it was clearly added, right? So it's going to be positive. Praise functions as positive punishment. This is the procedure you should go through on punishment and reinforcement questions. Identify what you're looking at based on what the question is asking. They're asking about praise. Praise is the consequence for Ashley coming out of her room. When praise is delivered, Ashley stops coming out of her room. Behavior decreases. Praise is added. Positive. Praise functions as positive punishment. Applied behavior analysis considers positive when something is blank and negative when something is blank. We just went over it. Quick little review. This should be a very easy question. When we use the word positive in applied behavior analysis, we're typically referring to what? Consequences, positive reinforcement, positive punishment. And when we say positive, we're talking about what? We're talking about adding a stimuli to the environment or stimulus to the environment. When we say negative in regards to punishment or reinforcement, we're talking about taking away a stimulus. And as a new RBT, that sometimes can be a little hard to understand at first, right? Traditionally, negative reinforcement is viewed as a bad thing. Well, negative reinforcement isn't inherently a bad thing in ABA because it's going to increase the behavior. We're just taking away something in order to increase that behavior. So it's very important that you understand this word positive means add and negative means taken away or removed. So let's find that answer. A, added and punished. Well, positive when something is added, yes, but negative when something is punished, no. Just because it's negative, okay, we're just taking something away. It can be negative reinforcement or it could be negative punishment. A is wrong. If we look at B, positive when something is added, negative when something is removed, that's what we're looking for. Okay, that's what those words mean in ABA terminology. You need to start thinking in those ways when you hear positive and negative. C, reinforced and punished, right? Those are specific consequences, not necessarily positive or negative. And then positive removed, no, removed is negative, positive is added. Applied behavior analysis considers positive when something is added and negative when something is removed. B is our answer. During your session, your client tells you that they wish they could work in the living room. Typically, your client always works in their bedroom. How should you respond? This one might be a little tricky. We're going a little deeper here. You have to consider more than just the fact that your client wants to alter basically the treatment. Now, first things first, do we let clients have say in treatment? 100%. Clients have a say in their treatment to a reasonable amount, right? And your client asking to work in a different environment or different room is totally reasonable. But as an RBT, before you can make that change, what do you need to do? A, allow the client to work in the living room. Well, not so fast, right? Maybe there's a reason the client doesn't work in the living room. Maybe there's a reason they're in their bedroom. Perhaps the behavior analyst felt the bedroom was a better environment. Perhaps parents didn't want the client in the living room. We don't know that, right? And as the RBT, it's not your decision to change that. B, check with the supervisor to make sure it is okay that the client works in the living room. Okay, good, right? Now we're going to ask our supervisor. Our client wants to work in the living room. Is that okay? Once you hear back, you can make a decision. B looks good, right? However, do we stop at B and move on? No, we always want to read all of our answer choices. Maybe there's a better answer choice. You're looking for the best answer. So C, check with the parent and the supervisor to make sure it is okay that the client works in the living room. Yes, right? Now we're respecting the parent's home. Okay, we're respecting their wishes. We're also checking with the supervisor. C is just stronger than B. Okay, you're asking the supervisor and you're asking the parent. If the supervisor says it's okay, but the parent says it's not okay, well, then you're going to need to let the supervisor know that, right? So checking with both the parent and the supervisor is really covering all your bases. It's just better than just checking with the supervisor. C is better than B. And then D, continue working in the bedroom. The client cannot change their treatment plan. Well, the client isn't changing their treatment plan. They're simply requesting modification, which they are certainly allowed to do. And in order to change it, we need to double check with the parent because it's their house, right? And our supervisor because they're in charge of the case. So how should you respond? C, check with the parent and the supervisor to make sure it is okay that the client works in the living room. This is why we don't stop on an answer choice. We don't move on without reading all of the answer choices. We're looking for the best answer. Your client knows most of the steps in a task chain for getting ready in the morning, but occasionally forgets to turn off the lights before leaving the house and locking the door. What would be the best type of task chain to use in this situation? A couple giveaways here. In this task chain, does turning off the lights occur beginning, in the end, or in the middle of the chain? Well, it occurs more towards the middle, right? Because after they turn off the lights, then they leave the house and lock the door. So it's not the end of the chain. They also know most of the steps, right? It seems like the only thing they forget is turning off the lights. So when we have a client who knows the majority of a task chain, and it's maybe something in the middle, 1 or 2 steps in the middle, what's the best way to teach that chain? Would we want a forward chain? Well, think about it. If we're forward chaining, we already know the client knows all the steps up to turning off the lights. So we're not really doing them much good forward chaining. They can already do those steps, right? We don't need to go through that whole process of forward chaining. What about backwards chaining? Well, backwards chaining, we know they can do those last 2 steps. It's just that 3rd step. So backwards chaining is probably better than forward chaining, right? Because they're closer to the end. But the key here is they know most of the steps. We don't need to go through that whole forward or backward chain process. We can just total task chain. Just teach the whole chain. Let them do the chain up until the point they don't know it. Teach that step, reinforce, and then let them continue. Total task chain is very effective. 1, if they know most of the steps in the task chain, or 2, if they're really good learners. If they're going to be able to learn a chain very quickly, there's no need to forward or backwards necessarily. Okay. Typically, we learn by total task, right? We just do the task, the total task over and over, and we eventually learn it. Okay. So those are 2 main reasons we use the total task chain. If they know most of the steps, 1, or if they're really good learners, 2. And the behavior chain interruption. Behavior chain interruption is a strategy where we are interrupting a known chain to try to evoke a new behavior, which we're not doing here. We're trying to teach a behavior that is part of the chain. C is going to be our best answer. You're sitting at a stoplight when the light turns green. Since you're looking down, you don't see the light change, but you start moving when the car behind you honks their horn. The honk is considered what in relation to you starting to move? Now, don't rush. It's very important that you realize this last sentence and what it is saying. We're looking at the honk, but we're looking at it in relation to you starting to move. Because if we were just looking at the honk could be a consequence of you not moving, right? But we're looking at it in relation to you starting to move. So in that case, the honk comes before you starting to move. So it's not a consequence. So is it an MO, an SD, or a prompt? Well, it's not an MO, okay, because an MO becomes before the SD. The real SD for you moving is the light turning green, right? We know when the light turns green, we go. In this case, however, the light turned green, which was the SD, you didn't move, okay? Somebody honked behind you, which functioned as a temporary SD or a prompt. The honk is considered a prompt. It comes after the SD, before your response, and it gets you to engage in the behavior we want to see. Again, you have to be very careful with what the question is asking. The honk in relation to you starting to move. That matters, right? Because it matters how we look at the honk, right? The honk is before you start moving. It can't be a consequence. If it said just the honk is considered what? Well, the honk could certainly be considered a consequence of you not moving, right? Again, read carefully, read slowly. This last sentence is usually the most important sentence because it's going to tell you exactly what you're looking for and how to answer the question. Consider the following scenarios. When would it be most appropriate to use punishment as a first option? Okay, as we know, punishment is rarely our first option. We're reinforcement driven. We want to teach replacement behaviors. That being said, punishment is not always not an option. When might we want to use punishment? A, the target behavior is especially annoying to the client's family. This is a tough one. A lot of families will say, well, it gets very annoying when they do this. Can we please change it? Now, that's going to be up to your supervisor ultimately, but should we punish something just because it's incredibly annoying? No. We should always try to teach using differential reinforcement, other methods before we just start punishing because something's annoying, right? That isn't necessarily ethical. B, the target behavior is resistant to change. Well, just because it's resistant to change doesn't mean we've exhausted all other options other than punishment. Maybe we haven't found the right reinforcer. Maybe we haven't found the right differential reinforcement, okay? We can't just jump to punishment because the behavior is slow to change. C, the target behavior puts the client sibling in danger. Now, this is what we consider a crisis or an emergency scenario or a potential, right? If the client's sibling is in danger from the target behavior, we need to reduce that behavior immediately. Punishment reduces. So if we can punish it, we might have to use it if the client's sibling is in danger. Certainly C is better than B or A. What about D? The target behavior is very important to the client's family. Again, that might be, we can't just go in and start punishing everything that's important. Okay, we're trying to be a reinforcement first, okay, situation. However, if the target behavior is putting the client's sibling in danger or somebody else in danger, punishment might be necessary as a first option. C is definitely the best answer here. C is our answer. If you were asked by your supervisor to graph data, what type of graph would you most likely use? Okay, if you've followed me a while, you might have seen a similar question to this because they want to know, do you know what the most common type of graph is in ABA? Well, hopefully you do. It's going to be a line graph. If you're ever asked to graph data, most likely you're going to be using a line graph. Now, do we use a scatter plot? BCBAs occasionally will use a scatter plot for certain situations. A withdrawal design is something you don't need to know as an RBT. And then a pie chart is very rarely, if ever, used in ABA as far as applied practice goes. If you're going to be graphing anything, most likely you're using a line graph. It's the most common form of graph in ABA. Maddie did not speak when she first started ABA therapy. Today, she said hi to her RBT and received reinforcement. Maddie is now saying hi in response to any verbal SD. Maddie's behavior is what? No, this is great, right? No words, and now she's saying hi. But what typically happens is that hi starts to appear everywhere, right? Get reinforced once, big reinforcement. Hi just starts coming out of every scenario, okay? Now we can shape that up, no worries. But what is this considered? Is this response generalization? Response generalization says what? It says for one stimulus, there's going to be multiple responses. Well, in this case, it's one response across multiple stimuli. So if anything, it'd be stimulus generalization, but it's not response generalization. B, not generalized. Well, it is generalized, but what's the problem? It's C, overgeneralized. It's now occurring too much. The behavior is occurring when it shouldn't be. That's what we consider overgeneralization. The behavior is occurring too much and in scenarios where it shouldn't be. So in this case, we would go in, shape it, right? Teach discrimination, et cetera, et cetera. No big deal. However, it is considered overgeneralization and needs to be addressed. And then D, a result of negative reinforcement. No, this was a result of positive reinforcement. She said hi, received reinforcement, positive reinforcement. Maddie saying hi in response to any verbal SD is C, overgeneralization. Okay, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Check out rbtexamreview.com for all of our study materials. Any questions or comments, leave those below. Happy to help. Work hard, study hard.